You're listening to Leaf Filter Radio, and the guru of gutter protection himself, Chris Coonahan, is here to take your most pressing leaf-related questions.
Hey, everybody, Chris here. I understand we have Ron on the line. Ron, where are you calling from?
Uh-oh. Ron, are you calling from a ladder?
Well, I was. I wanted to ask Chris what I need to do to get my gutters ready to have leaf filter installed.
Oh, Ron, you don't have to do anything. A Leaf Filter Trusted Pro will come out and clean out your gutters, realign and seal your gutters, and install Leaf Filter, America's #1 gutter protection system.
So I didn't need to get on this ladder?
Ron, Leaf Filter Trusted Pros are in your neighborhood and ready to help. Just visit leaffilter.com/day to schedule your free gutter inspection and get up to 30% off.
Thank goodness. What was that site?
That's leaffilter.com/day for your free gutter inspection today. See representative for warranty details. Promotion is 20% off plus a 10% senior or military discount. One discount per household.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning in to the program. It's Friday, September the 12th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams producing the Come On With It edition of the show. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So I kind of, fingers crossed, promised to not talk about the Blue Jays every day throughout the remaining season. But boy, what a performance by Kevin Gausman last night. So a complete game shutout, gave up 2 hits, only walked 1 batter, struck out 9, 6-0 win for the Jays to keep their 3-game lead over the New York Yankees. Interestingly, you know, when we were growing up, complete games were not an oddity, but they are now. Last night's complete game by Gausman was only the 27th of the year in Major League Baseball. It was only the 11th complete game shutout. So amazing stuff. Anyway, you want to talk about the Blue Jays, please do. A couple of random baseball notes. Dave Williams, were you aware that it used to be home run if you bounced the ball over the fence? Now it's a ground rule double. 1930, Brooklyn catcher Al Lopez hit Major League's last recorded bounce home run. In 1984, then New York Mets starter Dwight Gooden set the rookie record for strikeouts in a year with 251, remains the record today. There you go. All right, just a reminder for rugby fans, tomorrow Canada, the number 2 ranked team in the world at the Women's World Cup of Rugby, take on Australia in the quarters tomorrow. And Sport Newfoundland and Labrador has announced the inductees for the Hall of Fame class of 2025, and they're Walter Forsey in the athlete builder category, powerlifter, of course, Susan Rendell in the athlete builder category, and of course a volleyball player. Get a load of some of Walter Forsey's accomplishments. From the mid-1980s through 1999, unbeatable in provincial powerlifting competitions. Won best lifter at every event he entered and set a bunch of provincial records across 4 different weight classes, many of which still stand today. Nationally, he claimed the Canadian Championship 10 times over 3 decades, broke more than 40 national records. He was a Canadian Powerlifting Union Male Athlete of the Year in 1998. Absolutely incredible stuff. Susan Rendell, volleyball player, represented the province at the 1979 Canada Games. They finished 6th at the time, historic finish for the province at the Games in volleyball. She was an AUAA All-Star 3 times, first Memorial volleyball player, and only the second athlete in school history to be named a second-team All-Canadian. She played for Canada, both in junior and senior national teams, so congratulations to both these very richly deserved inductees. All right, this story is getting some backlash. So the 5 players who were acquitted of sexual assault just recently, of course, they were a member of Canada's World Junior team back in 2017. So the charges were very, very serious, obviously sexual assault. All 5 were acquitted, and this was always going to be the case, I would think. They have now been told they're able to play again in the National Hockey League. They're going to become unrestricted free agents on October the 15th, and they can resume their NHL career on the 1st of December. Okay. So, of course, even when reference to the fact that it was deeply troubling and unacceptable, and these are some of the words coming from the NHL themselves, they were found not to be criminal, but the players' conduct did not meet the standards of moral integrity. The NHLPA, of course, is pleased with this. And this also feels like a bit of passing of the buck by the NHL. Now, I think they were bound by their collective bargaining with the NHLPA that the players had to be reinstated to be eligible again. But now comes the PR nightmare, possibly, if any of the professional teams actually select and sign one of the 5 who were acquitted. But of course, you know the story as well as I do. This will be a very tricky piece of business, to say the very least, if any of the teams in the NHL are going to sign one of the 5 who were acquitted of these serious charges. Oh, very quick note for auto racing fans. Targa begins tomorrow. About 30 rally teams going to kick it off at Confederation Building tomorrow. Keep going with the more serious stuff. So remember the story where the superintendent of prisons, a fella named, oh my gosh, I had it here a second ago. Anyway, I'll get it. He was called the gun guy in some official submissions to provincial court. That's Dan Chafe, superintendent of prisons. But this particular fellow, his name is Waterman. He's 44 years of age. He has now been sentenced to 7 years in prison because of what he was doing with guns. The most important part of this story, and there's a bunch of charges. Originally, there was 140 charges. He pled guilty to 7, and he's now received his sentence. It's the 3D gun that you can print. He was renting a room down in Flat Rock and printing these 3D guns. No serial number, and they can't be tracked. And anybody with a 3D printer that can go online can find how to make one of these guns. Like many things, the law has not caught up with this. You know, this seems to be much more nefarious and dangerous, these 3D guns, even compared to their counterparts, the traditional gun as you can picture in your mind's eye. There's also something to be considered here. I mean, we can talk about the law, and it really is well behind catching up. So the judge, in this case Justice Walsh, a 2-for-1 credit for pretrial custody, recognizing what? The harsh conditions at HMP. So while there's a certain segment of society talking about tough on crime, fair enough, but at the same time, not wanting to commit monies, which we have already, to building a replacement for Her Majesty's Penitentiary, the dungeon that it is. Because what? If you want to keep the hardened criminals off the street for longer, then we can't see 2-for-1 credit given, as opposed to what was once time and a half. And of course, this is federal time at this point. And federal inmates, they only serve 2/3 of their sentence. So there's a lot to discuss when we talk about criminal justice and the application of laws and the appropriate nature of sentences, what have you. And yes, these 3D guns and the fact that we have not really caught up to their appearance. All right, here's some of the comments coming from some of the rallies around the province talking about the nature of the drug crisis on the street and the need to change the way we police and what have you. A lot of the focus on what was then 14-year-old Axel Martin. He died from what is a concoction of synthetic opioids last March. And to hear his sister speak was extremely difficult to hear. Absolutely heartbreaking. Chantel Kennedy Stagg. In my 40 years of life, I have never imagined this as something I'd be doing. I never imagined one day we would hold my 14-year-old brother's hand as he was pronounced dead. Oh boy. In this case, and for the first time in the province's history, the drug dealer, in this case a 19-year-old, has been charged with manslaughter. So when we talk about the nature of law enforcement and the criminal justice system catching up with whether it be 3D guns or these new synthetic opioids, this is the right track to be on, I believe, is this charge to be laid. We can talk about the scourge that is fentanyl and the pure cocaine we find on our streets, but to hear Axel's sister talk about it and to say the quiet parts out loud, which I'm really pleased she did, is somebody purposefully in the basement or in their apartment or in their bedroom or their garage concocted a drug cocktail that was more likely than not to kill somebody. So the charges seem completely appropriate to me, and it should be the case across the board. It's one thing when someone who's buying drugs knows exactly what they're getting, but it is different if you're buying something that you think is Xanax and it's not, and it drops you dead. So there's a lot to be done here inside the world of catching up with these crises, including guns, including the synthetic opioids, and the drug dealers who are purposely selling stuff that could kill. Now, many other drugs, including cocaine, can absolutely kill you. The purity is apparently much higher than it ever was in years past, but that charge has been laid and we'll follow that through the courts. All right. So the election or the pre-election announcements keep coming. And it's no surprise. This is nothing new. I mean, people see it for what it is. Some of them are very positive things that will help benefit different communities, but we all know what's going on, right? We've been through this before. Yesterday, an announcement talking about high-speed broadband. So they partnered up with a company called Explore, fiber optic connectivity across the island. So $94 million of combined federal and provincial funding, including $20 million from the province. It'll connect some 280 communities, connected with 36,000 homes. So it's a good thing. I mean, the ability to navigate the modern world does require internet access, and it requires the upgrade of cell phone service, I will also add to it. So here's a quote coming from the fellow named Brent Johnson, CEO of Explore. It costs, many thousands of dollars per kilometer to deliver fiber to these communities. And there's lots of kilometers in these rural areas, and it becomes very hard to make the numbers work, which is why the government gets involved. All right. The $94 million for 36,000 homes adds up to about $2,600 per household. And people will ask the obvious question, aren't there cheaper alternatives like Starlink? Okay, the rationale apparently is that we're going to do business with a New Brunswick-based Explore company versus Starlink. There's some other announcements yesterday, including $110,100 for the East Coast Trail Association. Okay. Minister responsible for the status of persons with disabilities, Bernard Davis, announced combined $350,000 to 14 applicants in the Accessible Vehicle Grants Program. Okay. Where's the disability advocate? We can talk about monies being spent or invested or whatever the right word is for you in different areas of life, different policies to be advanced, but one that the disability community is crystal clear on. There's the need for a disability advocate. And how that office might work into the future remains to be seen. But it's been promised. At one point they were talking about blending it in with the seniors advocate, which is completely inappropriate. But, that's one announcement that I think would carry a lot more weight than money for one particular program or another. Your thoughts? Let's talk about it. All right. I haven't had a chance to really dig into this story yet. I'll just make some high-level thoughts on it. It's the Education Accord. Important work. A 10-year roadmap about how education can be modernized. The problem is that apparently, and again, I just read the story 10 minutes before we went live to air. Apparently, it includes at least 15 citations for non-existent journals, articles, and documents. Uh-oh. How this was eventually edited and read and ensure that we were talking about things that can be verified, documents from other universities, films, or whatever the case may be, but apparently at least 15 are fictitious. So the immediate thought is this must have been generated with artificial intelligence. And we've seen a lot of big, major, consequential reports in the very recent past be delivered to the public, just then to find out that the citations, some of which are absolutely unverifiable, don't exist, period. This derails, in some form, the important work done by everyone who was involved in the Education Accord. Oh, boy. So what do we do here? Obviously, the co-chairs and anybody working with the co-chairs, Dr. Goodenow and Burke, have to go back to the drawing board with this entire document and scour it to ensure that every single thing that's cited, any documentary, any document, any source can be verified as real and legitimate, just so we can get the conversation back on track. Because it's too important for something like this to totally change the focus on the content of the report that cannot be verified to the important work that needs to be done in the education system in this province. But I just read the story, so I'll have to do a little bit more thinking and reading before we go too far on it. Your thoughts are welcome. All right, what do I got here? Made mention yesterday of the major projects list that was leaked but announced and confirmed by the Prime Minister yesterday. And we can get into some of it. Now, the fact of the matter is there are no Newfoundland and Labrador-based projects. They could have been a mine in Labrador. We were talking about the Fixed Link, Beta Nord, and Gull Island, none of which are mentioned in this particular project, in this announcement. There's also some questions here. For people disappointed that, for instance, Beta Nord is not mentioned, Beta Nord is boiled down to a business decision at this moment in time. Could it have been given a nudge over the finish line had the Fed say they'd be involved, whether it be to pay the royalties to the United Nations or whatever the case may be? Maybe. What would the federal government's role be in Gull Island? Still a big question for me. I don't know what it means to you, but all of those aforementioned projects are not involved. The Highline one is Phase 2 of LNG Canada out in Kitimat. That's liquefied natural gas. As far as I know, that's already been approved. We're waiting for Shell Canada to make an announcement on that. Isn't that the case? Then they're talking about nuclear in Ontario, expanding the Port of Montreal, a copper mine project in Saskatchewan, expansion of the Red Chris mine in northwestern BC. Talking about generating some $60 billion for the Canadian economy, tens of thousands of high-paying jobs for those involved. And then there's a secondary list of what might be next. Then they go on to talk about things like carbon capture in Alberta. The largest carbon capture project or carbon sequestration project in this country was in Alberta, and they stopped it. They shut down operations for two reasons. They couldn't make it work to the extent that they said they could, and that's what percentage of carbon could be captured. And then, of course, they couldn't make the business model work. So how does it work on the large scale? I know there's an investment over the course of 3 years in this province. I think it was $6 million from the province to investigate injecting carbon into depleted oil wells, oil reserves or reservoirs off our coast. Same thing in BC. They're talking about injecting the carbon directly into the basalt rock on the sea floor, because in 25 years the carbon turns into basalt rock. So there's some disappointment in the province about how we were not attached to that particular major projects list. But if you want to talk about it, we absolutely can and should. All right. MOU. I'm still waiting for confirmation for an email I sent. So just let me check that quick, because I was looking for permission to say someone's name on the show. All right. So not everybody hates the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding. And I'm putting this out there as a question. If we were not talking about the historical relationship between the province and Quebec, would it change the conversation? I don't know. But there's plenty of folks chiming in and plenty of concerns and questions being asked, and we absolutely have to ask them and talk about it, because it's critically important to get this right. Now there's a second, what they call Group of Nine, who have come into the debate, and they're on side with the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding. And they think it's a good deal, an equitable, a fair and balanced deal. And we talked about the names that signed on who were opposed, but this letter has now been signed by Calvin Nash, Anne-Marie Boudreau, Fred Cow, Brian Dalton, Mark Dobbin, Sean Leet, Robert Patton, Derek Purchase, and Peter Woodward. So also some pretty significant names signed on to the in support of. Some pretty notable business leaders and people who have done business with the government, both PCs and Liberals. I wonder, would it also change the conversation if this wasn't a Liberal deal? And I mean, I'll get some pushback for simply asking those questions, but I think that's part of what the subconscious nature of the discussion has been at this moment in time. So I know we have a call coming up with one of the signatories to the letter questioning the MOU, saying it has to be scrapped in full. Former Premier Danny Williams is planning to call this morning, is my understanding. So we look forward to that conversation. And we also welcome anybody to talk about the MOU from a different later angle. Now, one of the biggest developments in this Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding business has been the resignation of Michael Wilson. Absolutely important development therein. He is now speaking a little bit more about his resignation, which happened on the 7th, and the letter was submitted on the 12th. He wants the government to release an unredacted text of his resignation letter. He says, releasing my letter would demonstrate transparency and enable the public to make an informed decision. Absolutely fair enough. You know, but some of the high-level stuff that we have seen in the in the redacted version, it does paint a picture about he thinks that the panel is compromised in some form. And I'm not trying to put words in the man's mouth, but he resigned for a reason, and he resigned for very specific reasons. It would be helpful to know what they were. Michael Wilson had a solid reputation, an excellent reputation, professional background that made him an appropriate selection for the committee. So, with all of that CV, it would be helpful to the discussion and for public discourse and for the public's better understanding of the MOU, which is complex. There's no question about it. But I'd love for the government to release it, and they should. This is not an egg-on-your-face type of business, because remember, this contract, the road, this MOU, and the pathway to definitive agreements is going to impact the province for 50 years, 5 decades plus. So that would mean successive governments. In 40 years from now, or in 20 years from now, if we look back and think, oh my God, what have we done? Yes, it might be negative coverage of the historical operations of this current government, but by and large, residents of the province, ratepayers, taxpayers, not so much that we're concerned with one individual politician and or their party's legacy, it's benefit. What does it really mean to me? You know, will I be throwing some sort of tantrum about the Liberals 20 years from now if we figure out that this has gone completely sideways? Maybe. But more importantly, I'll be worried about the loss of revenue, right? Same thing when we talk about Muskrat. Yes, it's a progressive conservative project. It is. They can't walk away from it. Even that said, nobody really opposed it. You know, they talked about benefits agreements and the like, but no political party was out there shouting at off the mountaintops about, you know, shut it down, we're not doing it, we shouldn't do it. It's simply not what happened. So Mr. Wilson has sent me a letter, and I'm not going to read anything from it until I get his permission to use the comments therein and attribute it to him. But it's basically about what independent oversight would look like and how it should work and what the end result could be. So I'm totally into anything on the Upper Churchill conversation, as you know. Just very quickly. For starters, violence begets violence. Political violence begets political violence. The contribution of social media, just think about it. On November the 22nd in 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Texas. All of the decades since has been lots of time for conspiracy theories to percolate. Careful and close examination of this Zapruder film. But here we are in just a couple of days. There's been more exchange of thoughts and theories, conspiracy and otherwise, about the murder of Charlie Kirk. Nobody knows who the shooter is yet. Now, the FBI has released a picture of the shooter and looking for the aid of the general public. But a lot of this doesn't even make any sense. I mean, the call for war against one side or the other, before we even know what's going on here, and then leaked reports, which turned out to be unverified and not true, about engravings on the bullet that said, in transgender expression and anti-fascism. And apparently that's not even true. But that has caught like wildfire. And like we say, a lie makes its way all the way around the world before the truth gets out of bed. So now that's planted in some people's heads and it will never be taken away. Then there's a picture of the rifle apparently that was used, found in the woods. But yet, here we have the picture of Buddy running from the scene with a very light-looking backpack on. But apparently he took apart the rifle, put it in his backpack, ran into the woods, put it back together, left it there to be found, and then ran away. Boy, oh boy. Look, the way this gets handled and the rage bait that is just all the rage is going to be bad for everybody. It doesn't matter who you support. It just doesn't. How things are handled, how social media contributes to all of these fabrications. And now it's just been latched onto as being, for starters, now all of a sudden a trans issue? We're on Twitter, bad as it is. We're VOCM Open Line, follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show to wrap up the week. That can only happen if you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's start this morning on line number one, talking about the Upper Churchill Memorandum of Understanding with a gentleman who's made several presentations regarding his opposition to the MOU. That's Gabe Gregory. Joins us on line number one. Good morning, Gabe. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing very well. Thanks for asking. How about you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, thanks for taking my call. As you mentioned, I've been attempting to inform the public regarding the MOU. And yes, my opposition to the MOU is based on the fact that, based on the analysis I've done and the research I've done, that the MOU clearly is well below the value that Newfoundland people should be getting from our most valuable resource. I'd start by saying that, the Churchill Falls existing plant is by far the most valuable asset owned by the people of the province. Currently, that plant produces energy that generates a value in the order of $5 billion a year now at current market rates. And we get little to nothing from that value because of a 1969 contract. And, of course, all of that benefit today is going to Hydro-Quebec and the people of Quebec. And people in my generation, we've been waiting for the renewal opportunity for Churchill Falls so that our people and our province, the rightful owners of this resource and almost two-thirds owner of the operation, Quebec does own about just under one-third, or a little over one-third, that we would, get our rewards. And now we have an MOU that falls well short of that. We've heard the CEO of Hydro-Quebec describe the MOU as a fantastic, remarkable deal for Hydro-Quebec. With the upgrades and expansion in Labrador, they secure 7,200 megawatts of energy from us for 50 years plus for a price of 6 cents. And That's the real issue. Is the value from the MOU and what we're getting is so much less than what we should be getting.
Just let me ask you a quick question, Gabe, based on Michael Sabia and other executives at Hydro-Quebec and their comments. How much stock should we put in that? Because it's not like Francois Legault or Michael Sabia is going to go back to Quebec and say, well, we just got fleeced by the Newfoundlanders. Uh-oh, too bad. Off we go. Because they're obviously going to go back and say, we did great. Same reason that Andrew Fury, Andrew Parsons, Jennifer Williams, Carl Smith, Dennis Mahoney, and others came back and said, we did great.
Yeah, well, I think that's a critical question to ask, Paddy, and I'm glad you did. You have to look behind the analysis of what Hydro-Quebec is saying, and if you can verify it in fact. And I've done that. And I can verify it, in fact. But what I hear in the province of Newfoundland from our own government and our hydro people, I can't verify, in fact. So there's a big divergence of what's being said. So I think the statements from Michael Sabia accurately reflect the value of the MOU for Quebec. And his vice president, David Rioux, has made statements similarly that, the Gull Island project, for example, he's described as exactly the same as 1969. Yes, there's an index on the price, but indexing the price doesn't change the value in the contract over the term. And he described that by, saying, we're going to pay 11 cents plus 2% inflation for the Gull Island power. But that wouldn't be any different than if they had agreed to set a fixed price for the power, as they did in 1969 for the existing Churchill Falls plant. What they've done is, by doing it the way they have, the old way that it was done for 69, I should say, was a fixed price, as we know. Actually went down over time, but it was a fixed price per kilowatt. That meant that in real dollar terms, they were paying more money when they started than they are today, as you realize, and most people would, because of inflation. So what they're doing in this contract is they're putting in an adjustment for inflation of 2% a year, rather than having a fixed standard price of, say, 16 cents over the entire term, which would be equivalent to the 11 plus 2. So it's a different concept, but it basically has the same effect, and this is what Hydro-Quebec has told us. The agreement is the same as 1969. We're not paying market-based pricing for power. And this is the trap that we got into in 69, where in all the MOU, we're not getting market-based pricing for power, for existing power from Churchill Falls or under the new developments.
A quick question on that point. It's important stuff, Gabe, obviously. Would the only way to get actual market value be to sell directly to the market versus sell to Hydro-Quebec and they sell to the market? And like even in some of their long-term contracts in the northeastern United States, I think it's in Connecticut, 25-year deal at 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So I guess the base question is the only way to get market value is to sell directly to the market? Because if so, then there's no business with Hydro-Quebec in the first place.
Well, no, I think that Quebec is interested to buy power.
I think so.
They need power. Quebec is not the issue here. The issue is the contract. Quebec owns 1/3 of this plant and this, energy from this facility. They own 1/3 of the company. So, Quebec is obviously a major customer for Newfoundland Energy. They're our neighbor. I don't think that Quebec has got, like, if they had to go out and buy energy on the market, they know they're going to have them pay market prices. Just like if they're going to sell energy on the market, they're going to sell it for market-based pricing. But that's not what we are doing. The issue is not Quebec. The issue is us and our negotiation and what we're willing to accept. And one of our biggest problems, in my opinion, in the MOU is the fact that we've demanded this upfront money. So what Quebec is doing under the MOU, because we demanded it, our government has demanded it, appears, is that we want to get paid 17 years for power whereby the old contract gives them free power. And what Quebec has done is they said, okay, we'll advance you money for 17 years, but we're taking it all back from you after 2041. And that is the structure for the existing pricing of the MOU for the existing Churchill Falls Power.
Can you elaborate? Can you elaborate on that after 2041, the money goes back? Because I hear a lot of it, and people latch on to the fixed price, $33.8 billion, those types of things. But can you elaborate on that point of post-2041? And for starters, the government made a huge mistake when they established a committee to look at what the actual realities are in 2041, and they didn't tell us. So with so many people not even knowing what 2041 means, we're at a starting point of being misinformed anyway. So elaborate on $17 billion back after 41.
Well, it's not $17 billion. I'll start with, Patty. I mean, that's the line that we get here, okay? But if you look and analyze, and I've looked and analyzed at this for months, and I've asked many people, informed people, to explain to me how the government is saying $17 billion. It's not $17 billion to start with. Okay? So no one has been able to explain $17 billion. But let's assume that it's $17 billion, as they're saying. Okay? Well, what I have proven and analyzed, and this has been confronted to Newfoundland Hydro officials, is that, and this is written in a blog on Uncle Marley for those that are interested, but it's very complex to explain. You know, it's a very detailed financial analysis that is very difficult to explain on a conversation like this. I'd have to sit down and take people through the actual workings of how inflationary considerations adjust to real pricing, how the real pricing is structured in the MOU. But Quebec has laid these prices out for us. Hydro-Quebec has. And if you analyze them, you will see that in the years to 2041 and post-2041, there's a very distinct pattern in the pricing in real terms. Okay? And this is not just by circumstance. I mean, this works out almost to the dollar, that you can take the monies that are advanced between now and August 2041 and connect them to the pricing from 2041 for the 15 to 20 year period after that. Every dollar we pay or get advanced is recovered through a lower rate up to that point in time. So if you haven't read that post, I'd encourage you, or anybody who is interested to understand that, should read that post. Now, the former CEO of Newfoundland Hydro, Bill Wells, I've heard Bill on your program, and I've heard him on other media. He has stated this, and the current CEO of Newfoundland Hydro explains this by saying, well, Quebec, you know, they had this agreement. They're not going to give up that agreement for basically, you know, no price for power from now to 2041 is virtually free at 0.2 of a cent. and I can understand that. Why would they give it up? Okay? We fought in courts for years. It hasn't changed. It's ironclad. So why would you expect the people of Hydro-Quebec or the people of Quebec to give us that benefit? But what we've done is we've borrowed from our future generations by doing that, and we've compromised our bargaining power to get a better market price. In value terms, the MOU is paying us way less than 50% of replacement cost. So just think about in terms of the average homeowner in St. John's. A house is average today selling for in the high $300,000, $400,000. Who's out there going to sell their house for 35, 40% of its value? Who's going to sell their house for $150,000 when it's worth $400,000? Not bloody likely. There's no one doing that.
Well, and that's an interesting point.
But that's what our government is doing with the MOU.
Okay, value is the tricky one here. We can have definitions associated with price and cost. Value is a different kettle of fish, because I think, as you rightfully point out, my house is not worth what the assessment says. My house is worth exactly what someone's willing to pay for it. And it always will be. And the same thing for power. The only complicating factor with value and electricity, regardless of how it's generated, is that there's competition. Very much unlike my house is in a very specific part of St. John's, close to a school, close to a park, close to this, close to that. Not every house on the market is, but power is. For ratepayers, by and large, unless they have really green concerns and those types of things, they just want to pay as little as possible for power. I think that I can speak for myself and Dave Williams on that front. If the powers come from Holyrood, I'd like Holyrood to go away, but if the powers come from Muskrat or Holyrood or the Upper Churchill or Beta Spare or Hardwoods, I just want to pay as little as possible. I think that's just the concept of value, period. Do you agree?
Yes. I mean, is worth what someone's willing to pay. But Quebec has told us that their lowest alternative cost, which is a value consideration for them, they told us it's 16 cents. So if they had to go out and replace, almost 5,000 megawatts of energy, dependable, green, dispatchable energy in the market today, they will have to invest in the order of $100 billion. That's what that means. So Quebec is not going to walk away and go and spend $100 billion. Okay?
Yeah, but that would also include replacing...
As is being suggested by, the government here, and walk away from their one-third ownership from a plant that produces power for nothing.
Yes, but that number that you... One second, though. That number that you use about replacement cost, that would also include replacing the over 5,000 megawatts currently established at the Upper Churchill. So that point does...
I'm only talking about replacing the existing energy at Upper Churchill that Quebec is buying. They're getting about 4,800 megawatts of power from that plant right now.
Gabe, can I jump in for 1 second, please? And not to be rude. Either I can put you on hold, we come back and finish your thoughts, or you can join us again next week to elaborate. Which would you prefer? Because I really have to get a break in here.
Okay, I can come back, or whatever you want to do, Paddy.
Let's start again fresh next week, because this is about halfway through the conversation. I'd like to have the full conversation. So can we finish next week at a time at your convenience?
Yes, no problem.
Let's do exactly that. I appreciate your time this morning.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye-bye. Let's get a break and don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Well, you might know Corey Tedford as the founding member of Crush. You might have seen him on the road with Ron Hines, Alan Doyle, but bringing the show on the road to arts and culture centres right around the province beginning on September 24th out in the city of Corner Brook. Some tunes, some tales. Join us on line number 3 is Corey Tedford himself. Good morning, Corey. You're on the air.
Hey, how are you, buddy?
Doing okay this morning. How about you?
I'm doing great, my man. That was quite the interesting conversation you were just having.
There's a lot to it. That's for bloody well sure. Before we get going here, before we get into it here, Corey, what time would you like your wake-up call?
I would love it for 7:30 in the morning with the chocolate, please. Yes, indeed.
That bit of inside baseball. I'm grand, man. Welcome back to the show.
Great. Do we have our jean jackets on this morning, Patty?
There will be denim.
There will be denim, buddy.
Good man. So, Corey, let's jump into it. What can people expect when they buy a ticket to go see at the Arts and Culture Centres?
Again, it's 24 Corner Brook, 25 Grand Falls, 26 Gander, 26 in St. John's. And I got a big old band with me this time, 7-piece band. Material from all of my records and the Crush stuff, and some fun songs I've been singing for years by other artists, like I'll definitely be doing a Vince Gill song. And big band. I've got Chris McFarlane on drums, Ronald J. Hines from Clarenville on bass, Chris Kirby, a boy from North Arm, on Hammond, and I got Rainey Haley and Micah Smith from up here in Nova Scotia, going to be singing backing vocals. So there's going to be a racket coming at you, I can guarantee you that. Lots of noise.
So maybe a little blues vibes with Chris Kirby on Hammond?
100%. We're definitely going to get into some soul, R&B, blues, gospel stuff, rock and roll, a little bit of country. It's going to be an interesting evening of a bunch of different genres.
Of course, you are from the province and taking the tour back around the province, which is awesome stuff. How different is it, Corey, to play in front of the audiences here? Because I mean, we can catch you on the lower deck equals lesser deck. We can catch you all across the country. But what does it mean to play in front of the hometown folks?
Look, I was having a conversation with someone a couple of days ago, saying that, my main gig, like you were just saying, is with Alan Doyle. So we play everywhere, all over the world. And I'm very grateful to be able to get to do it. and I'm a fortunate man, but there's only one Newfoundland. I mean, it's home, and to come home, man, dude, when I was a 15, 16-year-old kid in my mom's and dad's basement trying to figure out how to play Eruption by Van Halen, if you'd have told me I could get to tour through the Arts and Culture Centers with a 7-piece band in Newfoundland, I'd become your cracked. But this is what's happening, and I'm grateful to be able to come home and get to play for a bunch of people that have probably heard me play before, and most of them are going to be family. So that's the joy of it, man. And also to bring people through that have never, like the girls have never ever toured Newfoundland. So just to show them, the sights and sounds off the stage of Newfoundland is a joy, man.
Listen, close your ears for a second, Corey, while I fanboy a little bit. Folks, go see the show. I mean, between the songwriting capabilities, the voice, the axe master, the wizardry on the guitar, backed by a 7-piece band, this is going to be a great night out. I'm looking forward to going. So do yourself a favor. Go to the Arts and Culture Centre website, which is simply artsandculturecenter.com. Go to shows and tickets and buy one to go see Corey Tedford and his band. One more time, September 24th out in CB, Corner Brook. 25th, Grand Falls, Windsor. 26th in Gander. The 27th, it all wraps up here in the city of St. John's. Final thoughts to you, Corey, before we let you go.
Grand to chat with you, boy. I always love it. And we both hopefully will have a jean jacket on.
Collars up, baby.
Collars up, buddy.
Thanks, Corey. Good luck, bud. Break a leg.
Good man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. It's Corey Tedford. Let's get a break in. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the gentleman runner for the Liberals in St. John's East, Kitty Vitty, whenever the election's going to be. That's John Whalen. And good morning, John. You're on the air.
Morning, Patty. How you doing?
Best kind. How about you?
Oh, well, I always find it interesting with the debate that's happening on the Churchill Falls agreement, and I'm a bit of a cynic, so it strikes me that it's a bit like arguing whether a cup is half full or half empty. We don't have definitive agreements yet. We don't know what the actual deal is going to look like, and I can't help wondering what impact this is having on our bargaining position at the table, because it's certainly casting doubt on sort of the unity in this province to get this deal done.
That's fair, although I don't imagine people who are on either side of the issue are too concerned, nor do I think it's having a massive impact. But what I will say, John, is opposition parties and opposition to the MOU in the province of Quebec sound eerily similar. I mean, the opposition parties are losing their mind over this. Even if Michael Sabia, who carries a pretty big stick in this world, politically and in the private sector, what he says, but look, the conversation in Quebec sounds just like it does here, and no one could be surprised.
In my mediation practice, the general rule is that you've got a good deal when both sides are unhappy, and I can't help but wonder if that's an indicator that we are striking a fair deal. But I'm calling in today about more specific district issues, and I think when I've been on the doors lately, I've been hearing a lot of people concerned in St. John's East, Kitty Vitty, with what is the prevailing issue around the city, really, and it's the drug use, public safety, perceptions of public safety, and in particular to our area, the impact of doing social good. There's no free lunch, as they say, and it all comes with a cost. And when you knock on doors in Georgetown or you knock on doors in Rabbitown, you've got people with young families. You've got people who've moved to the neighborhood saying they fully support looking after disadvantaged individuals in our community, but there has to be some balancing of interests and rights, across the spectrum between people who live in a neighborhood and people who come to a neighborhood to receive what are essential services, right?
Absolutely. You want to talk about something specific in that envelope?
Yeah, so I think what we really need to talk about is, when I speak to board members at places like the Gathering Place, they say, well, look, people come from all around the city to get these types of services. They show up on the bus for breakfast in the morning, and then they stay for lunch and they stay for supper, and they're around the neighborhood throughout the day, and that's a valid point. What that says to me is we've got hungry people all around St. John's, and we need to look at spreading out those services. We need to take a look at affordable housing and making sure that we aren't creating single-use communities. We want to avoid sort of the Bioward Market experience, and we need to make sure that we create neighborhoods around sort of the Northeast Avalon that have a mix of economics, the whole economic spectrum being covered in particular areas. And one of the things we need in order to do that, well, first we need to get that new prison built so that we can differentiate between streams of offender, because there's people who commit crime because they're committed to a life of crime, and there's people who commit crime because they don't have a viable alternative or they have an addiction. We need to make sure that when they, serve their debt to society by being incarcerated for committing crimes, we're giving them good options for whether it's drug rehabilitation, whether it's education, whether it's vocational training. And, that new facility has a lot of that stuff baked in, so we need to make sure we get that built, on time, on budget, and up and running. The other thing we need to have, and, this is possibly the least exciting topic we could talk about on a Friday morning, but the province needs comprehensive law reform. So I don't think anybody should do it unless you happen to be an insomniac, but, pull up the legislation that's across this province, and you'll note that the last time we did a really thorough review of the legislation was back in around 1990, and the world has changed dramatically in those 35 years. When you look at things like the Conveyancing Act, the Lands Act, and the Registration of Deeds Act, just the three things that hit most people often if you're dealing with land in the province, they need to be modernized. They need to be brought up to a different standard. We need to talk about how land titles work and how deeds registry works in this province. That will make a material difference to individual Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. It'll make it easier for you to buy a house. It'll make it easier for you to get a mortgage. It'll make it easier for you to know, what you do and don't have as an asset. But it also has a dramatic impact on the business community. It'll make it easier for new businesses to open in Newfoundland and Labrador. It'll make it easier for large industrial projects to get up and off the ground. And it's one of those things we've had to do it for a long time. It's just no one wants to put it on the front page of the news. It's not a very interesting or exciting topic, but it's one of those just an example of legislation where we need to get in and climb under the hood and do a thorough review of this stuff and modernize it in order to bring ourselves up to where we need to be from a statutory perspective.
Yeah, and some of that, like you say, it could be some bedtime reading, but it's important. I'll just add to it. I'm not trying to get in on your platform, but I would add to it things that I don't think we talk about enough when we talk about crime, punishment, and everything in between, is unless we figure out better strategies and approaches to poverty, addictions, and mental health supports, then we're going to be chasing our tail and just building bigger and bigger prisons until the cows come home, and they're never coming home.
So we call it sort of the crime control model. You either talk about a model where you try to rehabilitate the offender, or you take a model where you're trying to punish the person for doing the crime, and the punishment model doesn't work, right? That's the U.S. model where they've got the most incarcerated individuals per capita in the world. That doesn't fix the problem. That only sort of bottles the problem up for a little bit and then makes it worse once it gets out. We really do need to talk about rehabilitative models, but we also need to make sure that those models aren't having a disproportionate impact on communities. So we need to make sure that if someone raises their hand and says, hey, I need help right now, we need to have the resources ready to help them in that moment. And I think, if you do the extension on it, that's why so many people are talking about Churchill Falls, because that is what opens up enough liquidity for the province to start looking at some of those social issues that we've been wrestling with for such a long time.
Hear, hear. John, I'm off to the news. Appreciate your time. Good luck out on the hustings.
Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Happy to do it. Bye-bye. John Whalen, running for the Liberal Party in St. John's East, Kitty Viddy. Let's take a break for the news right on time. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's begin this segment on the top of the board. Line number one. Say good morning to former Premier of the province, Danny Williams. Good morning, Danny. You're on the air.
Morning, Paddy. How are you? Long time no talkie.
Welcome back to the program.
Oh, it's nice to be back. It's nice to be back. We've got an important issue on this that I know you're talked out on the MOU and you're probably fed up with it, but I wouldn't mind getting a little bit of your time just to give you my thoughts and views on it. I have, as you know, I've been out on it a little bit before, but if you don't mind, we'll have a go at it, and you can ask me whatever questions you see fit, and we'll see. How long do you figure we have? I don't want to chew up your whole show, but
no, we got a nice segment here. I'm not tired of the conversation. It's too important to get tired of. So let me kick some of the elephants out of the room. So Danny Williams, the man behind Muskrat Falls and what that's become, speaking out on hydro development, people would question whether it be self-awareness or your thoughts on hydro when we're still dealing with the issue regarding Muskrat.
Well, that's interesting. I kind of expected you'd come with that. I see that you're kind of accepting the smokescreen that's been thrown up, that this is about Muskrat, not about the MOU.
No, that's not it. What I'm doing is...
Let me finish now, Paddy. Just let me finish for a minute. You've opened her up here. So,
okay.
Sure. So I'm expecting a question on Muskrat. I stand behind Muskrat. I will stand behind it till the day I die, and hopefully beyond that. It's a project that we will own, control, operate. It's our project. At the end of the day, if this MOU goes through, it'll probably be the only thing that we'll have any ownership and control on the Churchill River, because Quebec will own and control all the rest of it. And having said that, it's ours, and I think that's so very, very important. I had a call, and this is probably one of the proudest moments I had. I had a call from the late John Crosby after I stepped down, and first of all he said, he used to call me Young Williams because he was a friend of my father, so that was a compliment right out the gate. Young Williams, he said, you stepped down. He said, it wouldn't be me, he said they'd have to drag me out by the bootstraps. I said, no, but I was time to go, and I figured I'd move on. And he said, secondly, and more importantly, he said, of all the things that you've done while you're in government, the most important thing you've done and the best thing you've done is Muskrat Falls. And I said, why is that, John? He said, well, boy, we've got our own plant up there. We own it. And he said, most importantly, you've given us an alternative to Quebec. You've taken that power down to our province, and you're going to move it on to Atlantic Canada. And that gives us huge leverage, and that's really important. So that's an important part of it. We're no longer isolated. That power now comes down to the province. And yes, it's not perfect. I would be the first to admit it wasn't perfect, but nothing is, Paddy. But I stand behind that project, and I stand behind John Crosby's comments. But we do have the leverage, but the problem is now we're squandering it. We're giving it away.
For clarification, I don't have the brain power or the brain space for smoke screens. I asked because people are saying it out loud, so I'll give you a chance to respond to it, is why I asked the question. So let's
Paddy, just elaborate. Just let me elaborate on that. Just so we get off here on the right foot too. And Muskrat Falls. What does Muskrat Falls had to do with the Upper Churchill and this MOU? Yes, it's part of the river. Yes, it's the lower part of the river. But, I will stand before you, or stand on your show and stand before your listeners and stand on my record. I gave 10 years of my life to this province, 10 of the best years of my life to this province. And, our poverty reduction program was the best in the country. Our student loan and grants was the best in the country. We built major infrastructure projects, Moldy schools we replaced. We built long-term care facilities. The Fraser Institute recently just said we had the lowest debt in this province. That debt was down to $7.9 billion when we were in government. And at the same time, we lowered taxes for everybody. So, Trades Newfoundland came out last week and said their two best income-producing projects were Muskrat Falls and Hebron. And they also gave the most benefits to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. So I'll stand behind that any day of the week, and, people can then decide whether my opinion counts. And it's only one person's opinion.
I think people bring up Muskrat because it's just mega projects, and this province, we've had a bit of a devil of a time with it. And then if you add in the implications of dealing directly with the province of Quebec, people have historical bad taste in their mouth. So all these things, whether they should be intertwined or not, personally for me, Muskrat has nothing to do with this Upper Churchill deal. But it's the nature. But it's the nature of the beast. Humans are, things get baked in. You hear hydro, you think Muskrat. You hear hydro, you think Quebec. And both of those can be boogeymen in many people's minds. That's why they get connected. Not that they have any inherent relationship when we talk about this MOU and the path to definitive agreements, but that's how the mind works for the vast majority of people.
Absolutely, and I'm glad to hear that, because it shouldn't affect your credibility on it. We got the 1969 deal and that, but the 2024-25 deal is a standalone deal that, in my opinion, is absolutely terrible.
Why?
Bill Wells has been out publicly and said that we got taken to the cleaners. I got to be really honest with you, Paddy. I lost a lot of sleep over this. When this first came out in December of last year, I read it, and then I reread it, and I reread it, and I read it probably 30, 40 times since then, as recent as last night, from 10 to 11:30. I read the 30 pages again just to go down through it, to make sure there wasn't anything I was missing before I got on to you. And when I went down through it again, it just confirms everything. I'm not going to bore you with a complete litany and analysis of everything that's wrong with this, but I'll give you the top 6, and then I'll give you a few more after that. Price. As Mike Wilson said in his brief, basically, that he released to the public, it's about the price. And it's very, very important because we have really, really undersold and given away this project in the MOU. We are told by Quebec, by Michael Savia, one of the brightest men in this country who negotiated this for Quebec, that it'll cost them 16 cents to replace it. Now, people, knowledgeable people in this province who have analyzed this have said that the comparison of that is about 2.5 cents. Gabe Gregory, who's just on with you, Ed Hollett has talked about it, Wade Locke has talked about our price, and they say 2.5 cents. Others are saying it could be 5.9 cents or 3.9 cents. Well, even if you take the 3.9 cents, that still is 1/4 of what Quebec is saying it would cost them if they don't do a deal with Newfoundland and Labrador. So if I was negotiating this agreement, I would start off by saying, what's it going to cost you? Savia, how much is it going to cost you if you don't do a deal with us? And if he's honest, he's going to say, well, it's going to cost me 16 cents at least, because that's 16 cents now. By the time they get around to building this and getting it through any environmental or anything else they got to get done in Quebec, I'm willing to bet it'll be 20 or 22 cents. So we're giving it away at anywhere between 2.5 and 4 cents. So that's the first thing. Second thing, term. 50 years. Why are we doing it all over again? Why did Quebec officials say it's the same as the 1969 deal? We're giving them a 50-plus year term, and we're not putting in a review clause. So we got no way to get back at this. And interestingly enough, if we did want to test it in the courts, the document says we have to go to the courts of Ontario. Really interesting for someone who's got a legal background, because this is a Newfoundland asset. It's a Newfoundland generated. It's our river. But we got to go to Ontario if we want to have any disagreement with Quebec.
Yeah, I guess the only upside to that is that it's not a court in Quebec, because that's where it's been heard in the past. And of course, we had 7 strikes and 0 hits when we tried in the courts in the past. Very quickly on term, because it's an interesting part of this conversation. If you were sitting at a table representing the province, signing a hydro deal with whoever the partner might be, Quebec, Fortis, whoever, would you sign for any less, considering the cost that goes in up front? I think renewal clauses that you talk about are critically important. And, considerations into the future about the cost of renewables, price elasticity, east-west corridor, federal investment in transmission, those all change the conversation. But would you negotiate a deal for any less than 4 or 5 decades on something that costs as much to develop in the first place?
The pattern in Quebec is normally 25-year deals. That's the pattern in the industry. You know what the answer was from the Hydro-Quebec senior officials was, we did 50, 51 years because that's what they wanted. Well, that's tough, Quebec. It's our loaf of bread. What are we going to do? Pass it over to you and then beg for the crumbs back on this deal? I haven't heard anything so ridiculous in my entire life. Quebec wants 50 years, so we're going to give it to them. Nonsense. Let me continue. Transmission. Last time around, federal government basically wouldn't take Quebec on. That's back in 1969. Wouldn't take Quebec on to push transmission through Quebec to give us some rights. Okay, lost that one at the time. They were concerned about volatility, civil unrest in Quebec. This time around, there's no reason why we can't get reciprocal transmission rights. We don't have any rights. We drop it off at the border and we give it to them. More importantly, to add insult to injury, on the Gull Island deal, they want us to build a transmission line from our river and our generation plant to the border and pay $3.5 billion for it. We have to build it at our own risk. So right now, it's drop it off to us. We'll take it from there, Newfoundland and Labrador. If you get any recall rights, well, we can't transport that for you, boy, because that'd make the price go up too much, and we'd have to pay too much for it. So no transmission rights. And the escalator is capped. They're out saying, there's all kinds of indices that go into this, the Quebec domestic rate, the commercial rate, fair market value rate, you name it. But it doesn't matter. If those rates all add up to 10%, we're capped at 2%. So we don't get the benefit of the fair market value. That's another thing. The other thing, which is really, really important to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, is jobs. But this agreement gives the majority right, the say, the veto, to Quebec on Gull Island and the expansion project. Now, that's $25 to $30 billion worth of projects. That's where all the money is. That's where all the jobs are. That's where all the work is. But they have the last say. They have the right to control it. So we don't have a say on these jobs. And when they talk about procurement, some of the indices that go in the agreement for procurement are based on expertise, cost and time efficiency, capacity to deliver. Well, who do you think's better at that? Hydro-Quebec or Newfoundland Hydro? We need to realize that we're up against it here. These are very, very shrewd negotiators who have taken us again. Few final comments, just a few extras I'm going to throw on because I don't want to throw everything at you here. They want to renegotiate water rights. So really, at the end of the day, Quebec is looking to get control of this river, get control of these generation plants. Do you know, Paddy, and I'm sure you do know, they still don't acknowledge our border.
I know.
Recent documentation coming out of Quebec won't even acknowledge our border. When I was down at the New England Governors Conference a lifetime ago, Jean Charest was putting up maps of Canada showing Labrador as part of Quebec. I had to stand up and tell him to take him down. I wasn't going to sit in the room while he showed Labrador as being part of Quebec. Now, in the minds of Quebec, Labrador is theirs. And so, if we want to pay the social responsibilities for supporting the good people in Labrador, that's one thing. But Quebec wants all the benefits. They want to take all the profits out. I mean, Legault came into this town here a couple of weeks ago, wouldn't take any questions, and basically talked through most of the news conference, and then at the end of it said, by the way, I wouldn't mind I wouldn't mind being involved in a piece of your rare minerals project up in Labrador. Now, my understanding, and I know very little about it, is that that's a very valuable project. That's very, very important to the Aboriginal people of this province. And, if we're going to take it, let's take it all. So that's part of it. So there's a couple of quick things.
Just let me make a comment on the Labrador border thing. That one just makes them look stupid to me. It really, truly does. The 1927 Privy Council, they put an end to that conversation. It was once again put an end to the conversation in 1982 with the Constitution. So when they keep putting it in school curriculum and, as you described, a premier putting up an illegitimate map, it just makes them look so silly. Like, I don't even know what they think they gain by this. I mean, kids in the schools are being brainwashed by things that are simply not true. Anyway, that drives me nuts. Gull Island, quick question.
Your point is well taken, though. It's really, really important because it illustrates a mindset. That's what they believe. Labrador is theirs. They never, ever gave it up. They denied the right of the Privy Council at 23 to have made that decision. So therefore, that they think it is theirs. And their complete obsession is to make sure that they control everything that's really important in Quebec.
Yeah, hard to argue. It's hard to argue that point. I understand where you're coming from on that one for sure. Gull Island, what does not get included in this conversation, and now the Grand Chief representing Innu Nation was at the announcement with Premier Fury, Premier Legault and others, but they have been crystal clear here. They have said unless they're made whole with the rate mitigation plans, especially the last $5.2 billion at Muskrat, which cost them in their estimation about $1 billion, unless that is rectified, there will be no Gull. I don't know how that's not been a big prominent part of this conversation, because they hold a lot of the cards, if not all the cards, in giving a green light to that development. There won't be another New Dawn agreement like the one we saw to enable Muskrat. So I don't even know how that doesn't get factored into these negotiations.
Well, Paddy, it's a really good point, and it's a big factor. And of course, the Aboriginal rights are also very, very important in this rare minerals project.
Absolutely.
Because, they have a huge stake in Labrador, and they have to be recognized. And we spent a lot of time with the leaders on the New Dawn Agreement, and we absolutely did. But I want to make it very clear that, the position of the Group of Nine here is we're not against Gull Island. We like to see Gull Island go, but it's got to be on terms that are favorable to Newfoundland and Labrador. We don't just go to go back and say, okay, well, what would you be happy with? Yeah, you will get another 50-year agreement, and yeah, you can have 40% of it for nothing, and yeah, you can have control of the project. Yeah, you can have control of all the jobs. Yeah, we'll negotiate a new run-of-the-river contract and hope that all works out for all of us on the river. That agreement needs to be renegotiated, and the province needs to go back and say, here's what our terms are, Quebec. Now, if you're interested in these, we'll negotiate around these terms. But the terms that you have given to us are simply not satisfactory. The people of the province know that right now, if we sign those definitive agreements, Quebec will have a right of first refusal for 15 years to decide whether they even want to bother to do Gull. So that'll take them up to 20,041, and then they'll have a 50-year agreement after that. So now we're up to 2091. I won't be around, Paddy. I hope to think you will be, but I certainly be long gone.
It's unlikely. Yeah, there's a lot to this, and look, I understand the questions that are coming out, and we need to have these conversations. Last one for me is, the whole concept of independent review. From where I sit, and I haven't negotiated for $500 billion worth of squat in my lifetime, obviously, but independent review of what we see in the MOU kind of feels like an exercise in futility. An independent review when we have contracts with definitive schedules, definitive statements, prices and costs and values, all assessed through actual legal language and real numbers, as opposed to 100,000 feet above sea level in an MOU, which is non-binding. At that point, I think we need a review. What do you think?
It's not as much, and I don't disagree, it's not as much an exercise in futility as this has been an exercise in cover-up. I mean, we had 2 task forces or panels or committees or whatever you want to call them that were put together to review these agreements and our negotiation. Never heard anything. They were done in secrecy. There was no reports. Never heard anything. I know that one of the members of one of those committees, David Verdi, has been a vocal critic of the whole MOU. So those two committees never happened. And then in order to get by the House of Assembly, an independent oversight committee was set up by the government. Now, I really commend Mike Wilson for his bravery in coming out in the last weeks and basically saying he resigned because it wasn't independent. It wasn't giving the public proper oversight. As a matter of fact, he said its independence is impaired. That's a direct quote.
Yeah, I read it.
Now, this man, that happened in May. It was never publicized by the government. They never came out and said it. They just said, well, the Premier came out a few days ago and basically said, well, that's not our job now to really be talking about, why he's resigned. That's up to him, or it's up to the media. Even better. Now, what kind of a statement is that from an open, transparent process where there's supposed to be independent oversight? In all fairness to the NDP, Jim Dinn and his party, and to the independent candidates, they supported proceeding with the MOU to the next stage on the basis that there would be a truly independent oversight committee. And that hasn't happened. And so the province has turned around now when one of the key people there has basically said, I'm a conscientious objector. I disagree with what's going on here. These reports would not meet, his own words, would not meet the public expectations and need for an independent analysis. So what are we left with? Two other people and Dennis Brown, the independent chairman of the Oversight Committee. Now, Dennis Brown is a relative by marriage of me. So, I don't take this lightly by talking about Dennis Brown. But Dennis Brown is as well a known liberal as I'm as well a known conservative. He's been very active throughout. He's organized campaigns. He's set up campaigns. He's no more independent than I am. And I can tell you right now, it's a sham. It's an embarrassment that they put him out and expect the people to accept him as independent, and then
which we've asked.
Michael Wilson puts in a legitimate letter and stated why he's resigned, and what happens? The government blacks out his reasons. They redact it and will not release it to the people of this province.
And like I said off top of the show, if they're going to talk transparency, they need to unredact everything except for what could be legitimate commercial sensitivities. But every other rationale from Wilson has to be on the public record. No question about it. Danny, I appreciate the time that you made for the show this morning. I'm desperately late for the break, but you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Paddy.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye. I'm just going to break in. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Say good morning to the NDP member for St. John Centre, leader of the party, Jim Dinn. Jim, you're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. Thank you for having me on.
No problem.
I guess this is sort of a transition call from my role as the MHA for St. John Centre to being the candidate for St. John Centre re-election. So anyway, it's an opportunity to talk a little bit about what we've been doing for the last 4 years, and especially the last 2 weeks with our announcements, and I guess what we plan to be doing in the election. So I just want to talk about that, and maybe even make some comment on the Church of Falls MOU as well. But for the most part, I think if you've followed what we've been announcing and what we've been, I guess, over the last 4 years, I would say it's been guided by the principle that, something I personally believe in, that we do better when the people around us are doing better. That if we want to address the safety issues and so on and so forth in our societies, that we address the basic needs. Something that the Health Accord, I guess, was trying to address by looking at the social determinants of health. So part of our campaign focus, our slogan is about that getting a better deal for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. So a lot of what we've been speaking in the last couple of weeks has been about that. It's about full-time permanent positions for nursing graduates, paid work terms, implementing rent and vacancy controls, removing provincial HST from children's essentials, pension plans and benefits for early childhood educators, to the minimum wage, to rolling back tuition. So everything is about, I guess, recognizing that there's no one silver bullet. It's about a suite of initiatives that will address this, and all within a costed platform which we have ready to go and which will be rolled out during the election itself. So that's where we've been very much focused on. We've got a good selection of candidates, many of whom have actually taken unpaid leave from their work to run for us. We've got a diverse group of people, and everyone from, I guess, professionals, municipal politicians, to fish harvesters, to community advocates. So we've got a strong slate, and we've got enough that if enough people vote for us, we can form government, for that matter.
So you have 40 candidates?
No, we don't have 40 yet, and the last 5 or so are struggling. But we have enough. There are 35, and we're still trying to convince others. But I will say it's a difficult decision for people. Some are not in a position to take unpaid leave. Others have had medical conditions. Now they've been admitted for surgery, so they're not able to. They were running up until the election, and then they get an appointment. And we've got people who've also decided to run for municipal politics instead of running for provincial. Anyway, big step that I can attest to. But I was retired when I made that decision.
Yeah. Did you want to make a comment on the MOU? And just very quickly, things happen really quick on this show, so it's sometimes tricky to navigate. But I just want to make a comment on jobs. Look, historically, the province of Quebec has been very... They're willing to isolate themselves. They play the protectionism, really the long game, and their jobs are for Quebecers. But my understanding is that there's legal binding definitions and clauses about hiring. In the benefits agreement, I'm told, I could be wrong, the benefits agreement will look just like it did with other mega projects. Qualified people from Labrador first, and qualified people from the island next, and qualified people from around the country, and then qualified people internationally. And that's what I wrote, that's what I've read, that's what I've been told. It's been reiterated many times. So look, and this is not about Danny Williams or Bill Wells or Gabe Gregory or Jennifer Williams or anybody else. We've really got to get down to the brass tacks about exactly what's in here. There's exaggerations of the pros and cons, which are muddying the water. It really, truly is, and we cannot afford to get this wrong.
Oh my God! Okay, you know what? And you hit the nail on the head. But from the get-go, and I'll speak to when Jordan and I and our caucus, we've been desperately trying to make sure that we leave the politics out of it, the partisan politics out of it, the anti-Quebec politics out of it. It's got to come down, and it's got to make in the end, the final definitive grievance have got to make a full sense, and they've got to have a financial benefit. They've got to be a better deal for us. It came down to is it a better deal? Does it have community benefits for local workers, Indigenous communities? Does it protect the environment? So that's what we're looking for. And the other thing about this that gets lost in this discussion, and then the discussion that Jordan and I had at the very get-go of this, is I was uncertain about whether we could just come out and endorse it without more information. Labrador West point of view, the suggestion that was being put forward that we need to delay negotiations would have been a death knell, a fatal to Labrador West, because they were already energy starved, and the companies were at the stage whether they were going to be able to continue there or not. Like any major development in Labrador West was being hamstrung by that lack of power. So for us, when we said, okay, how do we proceed with this? Well, then to get at what I was looking for, and that what we were looking for, the answer to the questions, was an independent oversight committee of some sort. And lo and behold, the independents were also seeking that. So we had sent the letter to all parties. The PCs chose not to be part of that. That's fair enough. But we had our own legal consultants to say this would make sense. The issue now, and I go back to something you said earlier, is that, we fully support this, is we need to see the letter that Michael Wilson wrote. I read the letter. I spoke to the gentleman himself, but he's confined by what he can say through the non-disclosure agreement. But I know the Premier has appointed someone else. But right now, unless we address those issues, if there's political interference here, then I want to know about it, because it undermines that trust and undermines what we're attempting to do. But the other part of it, Patty, this cannot be. We're in the middle of negotiation. This cannot be an election issue. To me, I think, yes, there's going to be a time when we have to have this discussion, whether it's a referendum, a plebiscite, or when we have definitive agreements in front of us and we know. And then at that point, it's got to be determined on its merits. I've listened to all trust me, people we've met with people who've opposed the deal, people who and they lay out some very clear arguments on this. But in the end, for us, it's got to be: is this a better deal? Is this a good deal for Newfoundland and Labrador? Is it better than the original deal? It's interesting. When that first deal was signed, I was 10 years old. I guess by the time this deal is signed, my oldest granddaughter is going to be that same age. So I really, truly do not want her living with a deal for the next 50 years or 75 years or 25 years, even doesn't matter, wondering if this was the best deal. So it's incumbent upon right now, I think, for the Premier to release that letter, or to allow Mr. Wilson to release it. And let's have that discussion first before we go forward, because I've had to have confidence in the process. We've been very clear about our need for transparency. And for us, it still comes back to this: are we going to get a better deal for the people of the province? And I've been trying to tune out the anti-Quebec rhetoric. I don't want to engage in that. Sure, the Premier up there is going to be saying what he needs to say to his people, as is our Premier down here. But let's cut through it. Does it make economic sense? And like you, I don't know. Like, my head has been full with it. I don't pretend to know everything there is about it. I've been trying to struggle with it since. I've heard very erudite commentary on both sides, but I do want to have confidence in the process that we established as a way through this, Patty. And it's all about making sure that the people of the province, my grandchildren, are going to are getting the best value for the resources that belong to the province.
Appreciate. I was just going to say, appreciate the time. I got to get to the break, but I'll let you finish your thoughts. Sorry.
No, look, we pay attention. I guess I'm asking the people of the province. You've had alternating PC and liberal administration of the government. It's time to look at increasing the seat count for our NDP, and we'll show you what we can do to bring a better deal for all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. And that's my pitch, and you'll hear more of it as the campaign moves through.
Appreciate the time, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. So just a very quick one on Labrador border business. I've been told that I'm showing awful bias in talking about my thoughts on the Labrador border. So Buddy says to me, sorry, Patty, you're wrong on the Labrador boundary. Obviously, it was never agreed on by Quebec because it was not impartially decided. I'm absolutely incorrect on the boundary because it was decided by a Privy Council in England. Quebec never accepted that. Look, why do we need Quebec to accept it? It was not only 1927, but it was also 1982 in the Charter. All these recognitions are demonstrable facts. Quebec refused to accept it doesn't mean it's not the truth. It's such strange stuff, man. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let us go to line number 2 and say good morning to a former Education Advisory Board member working on the Education Accord. He's with MONFA. That's Dr. Josh Leposki. Dr. Leposki, you're on the air.
Hello. How are you, Patty?
Very well. Thank you. How about you?
Fine, thanks.
Let's go back to January. Before we get into the news story today about fictional sources cited in the Education Accord report, when you stepped back or stepped down in January, why was that?
Well, I was part of MONFA executive at that point, and that position ended back in April. But I was on the executive at the time, and it was the feeling of MONFA executive that the process that the Education Accord was going through was just flawed in a number of ways. I would encourage anyone who's sort of interested in the details to go to the MONFA website, because we laid out a very substantial number of issues that we felt were going on with the Accord. But the gist of it is that it was really feeling like a process where outcomes were predetermined. We hear language like evidence-based decision-making, but I mean, if I were to characterize it, I would sort of turn that on its head and think about it as decision-based as evidence-making. In other words, there were things that government wanted to have said in terms of orienting things around the education system that were more or less decided in advance of the process. And as a representative of the faculty union at the time, as those problems became more and more apparent, we were just, unwilling to lend our credibility to the process any longer.
I've heard from people from on the outside looking in who are familiar with the education system and were really keenly following along with the story. They refer to some of the recommendations as feeling or looking reverse engineered. They had a desired outcome, and so they put the square peg in the round hole somehow and made it so. Then there was also people talking about questioning, and I'll get your perspective on this because I wasn't involved in any of this, is that it very much had a feel of top-down as opposed to collaborative. Unlike I think the Health Accord, which really felt like a massive collaboration, even if Dr. Parfrey and Sister Davis were, at the top as the co-chairs, it kind of felt different. Same thing for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, that was one of the ways that I and MONFA talked about the reasons for my resignation at the time back in January was that top-down nature. So, agreeing with what you just said, it really felt like there were a number of sort of predetermined outcomes in advance of the discussions that were being had. And as a consequence, we just were no longer willing to lend our support to that process.
Now the story today is a big problematic. Because, look, a 10-year roadmap to modernize education in this province is a good thing, conceptually speaking. It's needed. We need to modernize. We need to transform. But now with the report, apparently at least 15 citations don't exist in real life, whether it be documents or documentaries or films or reports. What do you think that means for how we're going to have to read and absorb the Education Accord?
Well, I mean, look, I don't envy anyone who stayed on the report who now has to deal with the aftermath here. But I mean, maybe to describe something basic, the whole reason one has citations in a report like this is so that you bolster the trustworthiness of the claims that are made in it. And if it subsequently turns out that references being used don't even exist, it really undermines, if not demolishes, the trustworthiness of the report as a whole. I mean, citations are there so that, in principle, a reader who has questions or maybe is skeptical of this or that claim in a report can go back to the original research that the citation is being used to say, this research supports point X, Y, or Z. And, in the cases of made-up citations, really what you have is just sort of evidence-based theater. You really don't have anything of substance behind those claims. You're crafting a document that has the semblance of a, scientific, if you want to use that word, kind of analysis. It has the trappings of it, the appearance of it, but no actual substance. And, I have to say that really undermines the credibility of the report as a whole.
Unfortunately so. And regardless of people are supporters of the individuals involved and or the concept period, this does put a pretty big black mark on it. I think that's safe to say, and that's not mean-spirited. That's just how it's going to be taken.
No, it really does. I mean, this list of 15 sources, maybe that doesn't sound like very many, but the problem is that if there are 15, one has to ask, well, are there more? And then that means going back through the report and checking, reference by reference. And if that is even sort of a possibility of having to do, just sort of speaks to how the trustworthiness of the report is undermined when this kind of thing is done.
Really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, sir.
Sure, my pleasure.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye. Dr. Josh Lepofsky had stepped down from the advisory committee working on the education court, and of course with MUNFA, the Faculty Association at MUN. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number one. Bill, Bill Power, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
Great today. How about you?
Well, I'm feeling better every day.
Good man. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, I'm calling for the Heart Valve Awareness month, I should say. And I had been one of the fortunate ones that was able to get to a doctor to get a stethoscope check done that certainly saved my life, in that I had a valve disease, severe aortic stenosis, and it got corrected and it got fixed, and I got my life back.
Talk about before you had the procedure to get your life back. So how was it identified? Walk us through. So, some people, we get that little pain or they get that little twitch and we kind of ignore it. And then the next thing you know, it's really serious. And here we are on an operating room table. So walk us through what happened, Bill.
Well, for me, I couldn't walk a flight of stairs without getting winded. And going for long walks was out of the question, especially if there was hills. But I guess 4 years ago, when Hurricane Larry came through, I happened to be on the island and spent some time with a chainsaw chopping up a tree, and that took the wind out of me. I fell to the ground, didn't know I was getting up. But prior to that, I had found a new doctor, because my old doctor retired, and he put me in touch, and I had a meeting. He wanted an in-person because everything was virtual then. It was COVID times. And I had, after Hurricane Larry went through and I had that episode and, basically passed out for a minute or so, and I said, all right, that's enough of that. And I got to the doctor, and he started with the stethoscope and kept breathing. He says, take another breath. And then he told me I had a murmur, and it turned out I had severe aortic stenosis. And I had to go get an echo cardiogram, and then they figured out that, you got some big blockages there. And I was sent to the Ottawa Heart Institute, and they, again, did some more testing and diagnosis, and they determined that the valve had to be replaced. Either I had a choice between open heart or going through the TAVI procedure, which is just going in through the artery, through the groin and popping in the valve, which is the option I chose. And it almost immediately afterwards the procedure, I was able to walk a flight of stairs without any issues. It was amazing.
Good for you. So what does recovery look like? From the procedure.
Recovery from the TAVI procedure, I guess maybe 2 days before. There was a bit of discomfort where the incision was at the groin, but that healed up in, I'll say, a week. And I was back to doing the things I was afraid to do. Going for walks, and I live in a condo in Ottawa, and 4 flights of stairs, and if the elevator's out, well, you got to walk them, and I had no fear to be able to walk them now.
Yeah, sometimes, you might just feel it's because you might be slightly overweight, or you maybe just didn't sleep much last night. You get that bit of very easily fatigued and you just reject it. It's worthwhile considering, Make sure you keep an eye on yourself, because we can indeed, even whether because it might be stress related, or maybe you just got a busy life, or maybe you're tired, recognize and listen to your body, because your body's speaking to you every day about how it's actually operating and how you should be feeling versus how you do feel. Anything else, Bill, you want to add this morning while we have you?
Well, I would say that, if you can't walk a flight of stairs, you can't walk around the block without getting winded. And if you get dizzy, well, definitely go get checked. And the one thing I would like to see as part of the medical procedures or things that are available is a stethoscope check that's available like at Shoppers Drug Mart. Like they got blood pressure. You can do your blood pressure, but we need to have that more accessible. You shouldn't have to wait for an appointment with a doctor. It might be too late.
Fair ball. Another one, how we dismiss some of these things. Some people say, well, I'm just getting old. It's natural. Maybe not. Bill, good to have you on the show. I appreciate your time, and good luck with your continued recovery.
All right. Thank you, Paddy.
You're welcome, Bill. All the best. All right. Bye-bye. All right, let's get a break for the news. That's 2 for 2. We're on time for the news. What's going on here, Dave? Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Well, I don't know how to introduce politicians anymore. Either the current independent member for Mount Pearl Southlands or the independent candidate in Mount Pearl Southlands. Either way, Paul Lane joins us on 3. Morning, Paul. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Morning to you.
Yes. Paddy, before I get to my main subject, I just want to say I participated yesterday in the rally outside Confederation Building, organized by Tina Olivero, in relation to individuals that are dealing with drug addictions, and I guess the lack of proper services and so on to deal with that, whether it be from the criminal justice point of view, whether it be from the health point of view. And I have to say that being there yesterday and seeing the pain on the faces of the family members that were there, some who have lost loved ones, some who have loved ones that are addicted, and some of them living out on the streets and all this kind of stuff. It was a very, very powerful event, and I think it just reinforces the fact that we really need to do more to deal with this issue. Drugs is a huge problem in this province. There is no easy fix, but there are a lot of things. It's a multi-pronged approach that's going to be required, for sure. But we have to continue to work on it, and we have to do better than what we're currently doing, because there's so many lives being torn apart. And to anyone that might say, because I actually had someone reach out yesterday, I guess they saw on the news, and they were asking about, did I support pharmacare because I'm supporting drug addicts? And I guess that was, it was sort of a negative comment toward it. First of all, I do support pharmacare. I don't think it has to be one or the other, though. These are people's lives that we're talking about. And not only is it the human aspect and the fact that it's individuals' lives and the families that are impacted, but the drug scourge is having a huge impact, whether it be from a community safety point of view or whether it be from a cost associated to incarceration, costs associated to our medical system and so on. So it's in everybody's best interests that we deal with the drug problem we have in this province is not just about supporting someone who's a drug addict. That's definitely not what it's about.
Just
it's
one
about
second.
our entire community, for sure.
What does pharmacare have to do with drug addicts? I mean, pharmacare at this point
nothing.
is...
Well, it has nothing to do with it. I think the inference basically is that you're supporting you're supporting, I guess, resources for drug addicts when you'd be better off supporting pharmacare for people who are not drug addicts and who need pharmacare. I guess that's and I guess my point is it's not one or the other. I understand people are frustrated when there's things that they need as well, for sure. I totally get that. But it can't be one or the other, and we have to care for our vulnerable. We have to care for people in these situations. And as I said, even regardless of how you feel about someone who might be addicted to drugs, the fact of the matter is that it impacts everybody in society, even from a community safety point of view. So it's in all of our best interests collectively that we deal with this issue.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little bit lost here because pharmacare, are we talking about the National Pharmacare Plan? Because that's just about diabetes supplies and medications and contraceptives. I don't know what that has to do with drug addiction.
Yeah, no. I think the inference that the individual was making to me is that I think this person was probably a diabetic who was hoping to get the pharmacare covered to cover their diabetes supplies.
Okay.
So I guess the point that the individual is trying to make is that I was supporting drug addicts, I guess, and support and resources for them when my time should be better spent, I guess, advocating to get us signed up to the federal program for diabetes supplies and pharmacare. I think that was the point that the individual was trying to make. And I guess I'm just saying that that while I was there certainly to support those families and to support everyone who's dealing with addictions, it's a much bigger, much broader picture. This is not just about individuals addicted to drugs. It's about an entire society. Anybody could get addicted at any point in time. And it's also about community safety because of the fallout from the drug crisis and people, having break-ins and armed robberies and everything else that are happening, much of it associated to drugs. So it is a broader public issue, and I think it's something that should be important to everyone in this province, whether you have a loved one who is addicted to drugs or you don't.
Yeah, we can talk about, drug addiction is a complicated issue. So we can talk about it as it pertains to enforcement of borders and border control with the flow of drugs. We can talk about how police investigate and how we prosecute and jail sentences and the types of drugs around the street. But the drug epidemic in this country is not just about overdose deaths, because people who are addicted will absolutely make bad decisions at almost every turn. And some of that can include being in your home in the middle of the night. It can include, going into a corner store where your teenage son or daughter is working to be held up. So, it just has impacts that we don't factor in at every turn. And plus, you just talk about interaction with healthcare and criminal justice pertaining to people who are addicted to these deadly toxic drugs. It's a problem for everyone. It doesn't matter if you know anybody addicted or not.
Exactly, and that's exactly my point that I tried to make to this individual. But I think people just need to remember that. Sometimes when we're there and we're supporting a particular cause, someone could look at it and say, oh, you're supporting drug addicts. No, I'm supporting community safety, and I'm supporting everybody, including people who are addicted, because that's still someone's son or daughter but at the end of the day. And it could be yours, by the way. It's only one bad decision away or that could happen to anyone. Anyway, the main reason why I called Patty was I just wanted to reach out about the issue of overcrowding and I guess planning. And this is stemming specifically in this case to a school in my district, Newtown Elementary. And I want to say up front that the administration at Newtown Elementary are absolutely super. Could not ask for better teachers and better administration. It has nothing to do with them. But basically what had happened in this particular case that we're dealing with is that government, of course, decided they were going to change the class cap sizes, and that came out in last year's budget. Or I guess it's this year's budget. And that's something, by the way, that I and others have advocated for a long time. So I'm certainly not against reducing class cap sizes. That is a good thing. The problem is, however, is that in this particular case, when they did it, it resulted in the need for 2 additional classrooms and 2 additional teachers. And Newtown was already at max capacity. So when students arrived this year at school, they took the 2 grade 6 French immersions, which they're in their last year and preparing to move on to junior high. So it's an important year. And they had 48 students stuck in the library because they had no classroom. And the parents, of course, were very upset about that. And at the end of the day, the only other solution they could come up with was to have one class in the library and then to take the music room and turn that into a classroom. So now we've got one class in the music room. We got one class in the library. So we don't have proper access or virtually no access to a library at the school. We've lost a music room, so now they have to come up with ways of doing music, whether it be up on the stage in the gym or in a regular classroom, and then that's the music and so on could be disrupting kids like next door in the next classroom they're trying to study or receiving instruction and so on. So it's really not a good situation. And again, it comes down to the whole issue around planning. And so, if government, and that's not just about this government, as such, but if you're going to be doing things like, in this case, reducing class cap sizes, somebody ought to have at the time thought this through and said, hold on now, if we do this, what impact is this going to have? They can look at the numbers and the projected numbers. What kind of impact is this going to have on the particular schools? And do they have space to accommodate it? But nobody bothered to do that, and now we're in this situation. I asked for portable classrooms. I've advocated for portables because there's lots of space that you could put portables onto Newtown. But I'm told that that would take 10 to 12 months to attach a portable to a school because you got to, I guess the lighting and the heat, and you'd have to cut a hole in the side of the school and all this stuff. So I said, well, what about if it's not attached? Well, that would bring some challenges onto itself because you'd have to go outside to go into the school every time you wanted to use the washroom and to go to the gym and all that. But I said, well, it's probably better than what they have now. So that is being looked into. But even if they had a portable that wasn't attached, it could still take months. And certainly I'm still trying to find out if they don't do it this year, is there any plan to do it next year? Or are we going to be in the same boat again next year where we're going to be overcrowded again? So, I'm going to be reached out to the minister. I've spoken to administration. I've spoken to people within the department. I've spoken to the CEO, and I will be speaking to the minister as well. But, if we're going to be doing these types of things, you need to do proper planning. And having in the year 2025, to have a school here like this that's now bursting at the seams, the music program is totally disrupted, no library, total lack of space, and these students being totally disrupted in their last year at that school, preparing to move on to junior high, it's really not good enough, and they should have planned for it. And all I can say to any parents that are out there is that I am doing the very best I can to advocate. But unfortunately, we are where we are in terms of the limited space they have. And unless they're going to manage to bring in portables in a real hurry, and they're telling me that's not going to happen in a hurry, then we're going to have to make the most of it. But I will be continuing to advocate for portables. And again, I would say, if you're going to do these things, please do proper planning.
Appreciate the time. Thanks, Walt.
Thank you, Paddy. All the very best.
You too.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
All right, let's get a break. When we come back, we're going up to Labrador. Get a Labradorian's perspective on the MOU. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Mike, you're on the air.
Hello, Paddy.
Hiya.
It's Mike Maloney up here in Torsco, sir. I was wondering about the ban on the fires. When is that going to be lifted, if it's going to be lifted?
Eventually it will be, for sure. But I think it's supposed to be reviewed, if I'm not mistaken, today. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I believe there's going to be some sort of announcement on the fire ban today.
I didn't hear nothing on the radio so far this morning, right? So I was just wondering. And because I believe moose season opens tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right there. Let me check very quickly with the government's website, because I have not heard it announced anywhere. As far as I know, the fire ban remains in place.
Yeah, I didn't hear nothing on any of the lines or anything, right? But That's what they're saying. They were supposed to review it today sometime, but I didn't hear nothing since, right?
Yeah, I'll put my ear to the ground and I'll check with the newsroom. If I hear anything, I'll say it live on the program, Mike. But as far as I know, it remains in place for now.
Okay, sir. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mike. All the best.
Okay, bye-bye.
Right. Bye-bye. All right, let's go. Line number 1. Good morning, Luke. You're on the air.
Yeah, hello. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
How are you doing?
Excellent. How about you?
Good. I'm listening to your talk show this morning. I'm calling from Shashashi in Aminu.
Yes, sir.
I was listening to the MOU, Danny Williams and all the other stuff that's been talked about with Laura Churchill and the Church Falls MOU and all that stuff. Just to let you know, we've been asked to vote on the referendum. That's they call it. Union Nation presented us a ratification vote for the Church of Falls hydro deal, and there's 2 or 3 parts on it, but the one there, $87 million settlement. That's been brought us to our attention, and they want us to approve and go ahead with this deal.
So, just for clarification, Luke, the $80 million proposed settlement is with Hydro-Quebec over the Upper Churchill, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Just a backdrop on it. This is something that's been frustrating us, and I'm sure people in the province will understand what I'm saying. We're given a raw deal from Quebec Hydro. I mean, there's no questions about it. There's no arguments from us. And this new deal that they want to do. There's questions with it too. The 3 and 5% that they have on us for royalties for the next 50 years.
Yeah.
First, years Falls and Gull Island and all that stuff. I'm not too up with the numbers. The numbers are big. Now, I just want to point out the lawsuit the Union Nation presented at the Supreme Court came about before that, a lot of the EU Nation leadership, particularly, Peter was one of them, and Anastasia Keeble was, through the years, right? Different EU Nation presidents who tried to meet with Quebec Hydro. And each time the Quebec Hydro wanted to, would slam the door in the faces, basically. I don't remember my cousin Joseph. He was one of the, he was a lawyer, right? Yeah, he was my cousin. But he went to headquarters, Montreal, Quebec Hydro, tried to meet with the CEO over there. And they escorted him out with security. They took him out. And they refused to meet anybody else after that. Greg, and then this Etienne, who was the other president, decided to, enough of that. We'll launch a lawsuit. So that number that was brought in the lawsuit came to about $4 billion. Now, how did that number come about? Well, it's from the great, all the consultants from Union Nation, lawyers and whoever, they're the ones who brought up the numbers. And I think it's like 5% last 50 years that comes to, if my numbers are all right, generally $80 billion last 50 years, and we didn't get nothing. And the deal they want to give us for the next 50 years, is 3 to 5% for the next 50 years. That's going to come to billions. And it's a bit scary when you look at it, because I don't think my people here comprehend the numbers and especially the difference between a million and a billion. They're almost like the same. They're the same thing, but not to a banker, right?
No.
The people who made numbers.
Well said. Not to a banker. Look, before I get to
people who are in leadership, but this is they slammed the door on our faces, and they threw our leaders out, and they want to give us a drop in the bucket, basically. That's what should I say? Initially, that's the word no, basically. No, that's unacceptable. That's very little, and what we suffered and what we went through. No, that's enough. Enough of that.
Yeah, when I saw the terms of the deal, I'm thinking $80 million, that's it? Now, the royalty can be relatively lucrative, but initial money's up front, $80 million in a issue going back to 1969, and the madness.
The big hydro is going to be laughing at us if we sign it, and they're going to be laughing at us to the bank. This is a raw deal for us, really. For that amount. That's like a change in the bucket for them. 80 billion. I was trying to compare a million and a billion, and the only comparison I can come up with, if you change $1 million to a million seconds, a million seconds comes to 11 days.
Yeah, 11 and a half days. A billion is almost 32 years.
And a billion is what? 31 years?
Yeah, 31 years, 7 months, the next number of days. Yeah, you're right. And that's a great comparison.
If you have a choice to live, $1 million or $1 billion, what are you going to do?
I'm picking them up with the B. Luke, I have to get...
If that number was life, then
Luke,
of course you would take,
Understood, and point taken. I appreciate your time. I got to get to the news break, but thanks for doing it.
But there's other matters before we get this ratification. But that's another time.
I appreciate that. We'll talk again soon.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye. All right, let's get to the break. When we come back, we're talking aquaculture, and there's a caller in the queue to talk about an Airbnb shut down by. We'll find out. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Leo. You're on the air.
Good morning, Penny.
Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Well, it's a great show you're having. I almost hate to change the subject, but I wanted to say something about aquaculture. We're coming up to the end of the week, and of course I'm referring to the mass mortality incidents that occurred going back to the end of July, and then another major one reported at the end of August. Totaling up, this last one totaling up to, in the numbers that Maui gave, 400,000 dead salmon. And, we need to note that these salmon are presumably at market size, because they did indicate that, they would be marketing the remainder of the surviving salmon. So the salmon, are like 10 pounds, 8 pounds, 12 pounds, that sort of size. And, you almost need to try to visualize, what happens in a big tank pen holding over, 500,000 salmon. And for some reason they have to try to move around to get more oxygen or to be able to survive. They come to the edge of the pen, and that's it. They can't go any further. And explanation that's given is baffling. It almost sounds like the explanation that Maui gave on September 4th is that it was cold seawater, a deep rush of cold seawater coming to the surface, and this is what caused the salmon to die. That's almost completely opposite to the reasons that were given back in 2019 when 2.6 million salmon died. Then the blame was placed on unusually warm water. And, the notion that it could be cold water at this time of the year is, really hard to wrap your mind around. But the fundamental question that the whole thing raises is the viability of this industry. If you think about it, we've had several mass mortalities related to winter chill events, when the temperature gets down to around 0.7 degrees Celsius, the salmon die because they can't get any oxygen. They freeze, their blood freezes. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have salmon dying because of warm water in the summertime, in the late summer. And, we all know where that's going. That's increasing. The temperature, if anything, is going to be more challenging. And when, these projects are being promoted, they usually characterize the Newfoundland South Coast as an ideal environment for this industry. And it's not ideal. The other thing that they talk about is the fact that, the environment is so supportive for salmon. But one of the things that's always assessed when there's an environmental impact statement is the impact of the project on the environment. But what we're looking at here is the impact of the environment on the salmon. And that's not given sufficient consideration. Usually, because I read these environmental impact statements and try to respond to them, usually they do a little bit of a dressing through it, and then they say it's predicted to have negligible impact. The environment has negligible impact on the project. But in this case, the environment has fundamental impact on the project, resulting in mass mortalities, ranging from 2.6 million to, in this case, 400,000, plus another 100+ thousand back in the end of July. And of course, by the time the dust settles on this, it may be much more than 400,000. As I checked the portal this morning to see if there's any new information, and there's nothing changed, since the last report that Maui gave on September 4th. So I think the government is not doing its due diligence by questioning the fundamental viability of the industry. I'm not even talking about the negative impacts that the industry does have on the environment. We all know about that. I don't really want to take the time to go into it now. But in Newfoundland and Labrador, where this industry is being held up as a savior for people on the South Coast, you really have to question whether or not government is doing their due diligence in assessing the fundamental viability of the industry, remembering that the industry was established in the early 80s, and we've got 40 years of experience now. You think that in most industries you'd have the bugs ironed out, but in the case of the agriculture industry, it's anything but. And you only have to look at the production figures going back, I looked at them going back to 2011, and the industry has an installed capacity of about 26,000 metric tons. And every time that they try to ramp up to anywhere near that level of production, what happens is there's a catastrophic event, related to something like infectious salmon anemia or sea lice. And, as a result, the production figures that they were aiming at just can't be reached. So there's, been production down as low as 8,000, a little over 8,000 metric tons in 2022, and 5,980 in 2014. So if you've got an installed capacity of roughly 26,000, and you have to settle for, only about 30% of that, it doesn't give you confidence, that the industry is under control and that it is going in the right direction. So anyway, that's the point I want to make. It's more for the Newfoundland government to really seriously look at the viability of this industry, taking into account, the climate and conditions, that we're likely to encounter both in the milder time of the year, which is now, and in the colder time of the year, which is coming up. And by the way, another important factor to think about is that the projects that we have looked at in the last few years have always included a option to grow the salmon into what they call a post-smolt facility and get them to a larger size, in some cases as high as 1,500 grams, which is 1.5 kilograms, and before you put them out into the sea pens. But none of them have actually followed through and done that. Grieg had that included as part of their proposal for the project in Placentia Bay. But of course, once they got approval, that was the first part of their project to go.
Fair enough.
And another,
okay.
Go ahead.
All I'm going to say, I do have to very quickly get going, but look, not only government assessing the viability in the future of the aquaculture industry, if we're talking about open pen fin fish farming, is the industry itself. I mean, they've got the financial stakes in this, and if the cause of the mass die-offs are things like warming waters and, or to take your point regarding the cold winter waters, and then depletion of oxygen, well, there's no reason to believe those trends aren't going to get, quote-unquote, worse into the future. So what does the economics look like for the companies like Maui and others, Grieg, and I guess Grieg has already been sold, but, I mean, the industry must be looking carefully at this. I'd like to see an updated cost-benefit analysis of the cost to do it in the bay versus the cost to do it on shore, where you can control the temperature of the water. You have so many more controls, obviously, for inputs and outputs, and to include the cost of the mass die-offs. I think we're probably getting closer to making it financially viable on land, to be honest. It must be.
Well, if you had to pay the full cost of putting the salmon in the open net pens, then land-based farming would be much more attractive, and it would be competitive, and it would be viable. The reason I'm saying that is because the industry basically uses the marine environment as a place where they can just dump the outfall from the farms because they're fixed. And, you've got 500,000 salmon in a pen. Or in the farm itself, and that whole area is being inundated with the sewage from that, which, as we know, these salmon have been treated for lice and for viruses, so there's chemicals that are included in that waste. So if the companies had to deal with even a small portion of that, the cost would be phenomenal.
No question.
So those costs are not taken into account when they do this analysis. And basically, they get a free ride, and the environment suffers, as a result of that. So if they had to actually pay for that, it would be, a far more competitive analysis.
I appreciate the time. Thank you, Leo.
Okay, Paddy.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye. Final break of the morning and the week. Don't go away. Welcome back. Quick one for Mike, who called about the fire ban. Apparently there's an announcement coming at 2 p.m. this afternoon about the future of the fire ban, whether it be lifted or remain in place. Let's go. Line number 1. Good morning, Bob. You're on the air. Hello, Bob.
I thought you said you had a guy talking about the fire ban. My mistake.
No problem at all. You're on the air. What's on your mind?
I want to give a shout out to Dr. David Price, who he's retiring. I think he retired 5 days ago. To all the listeners of Newfoundland, the man saved tens and thousands of children in his career. Me being one of them. I was 12 years old, took a big tumor out of me, and I know he's retired. And just a fantastic person, fantastic man. And to the politicians, if they're listening, if you could name a hospital after this guy, because he's a living embodiment of today's saint. So I just want to say thank you.
I'm good for you. I'm not familiar with Dr. Price. So what discipline was he in? A pediatrician, but you say he removed a tumor, so he was an oncologist or a surgeon, or?
Yeah, he's a surgeon, and specifically with children. And he was at the old. Well, this was 1992 when he saved my life, and there were some posts put up I was reading, and there's just the thousands of people that, it's very heartfelt thing, what the man has done for, the people and the children of Newfoundland. Just want a big, huge thank you to Dr. David Price, all the hard work, and I hope he enjoys his retirement, I guess.
Well, I'll join you in echoing the exact same thing. Thank you, Dr. Price, and hopefully you have a happy, healthy, lengthy retirement.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thanks. See you, Bob. There we go. That's a nice one. Let's go to line number 5. Susan Guiney, you're on the air.
Hello, Patty. How are you?
Not too bad at all. How about you?
I'm doing good. Of course, you know what I'm going to be talking about. Did you get the flyer bill sent you?
I did get the flyer bill sent to me. Yep. Go right ahead, Susan.
Okay. We're talking about the long walk. He's starting September 27th, noon, just outside of Renews, just outside of where we live. And he's non-stop walking to Signal Hill, and he'll arrive there September 28th. And he's asking anybody if they want to join him for a little walk, a long walk. He's got all the places posted that you can join him. Big Goods, Mobile Arena, Brickett South, Squid Jigger, Ecclefort Hall, anywhere that you see him. And he'll be walking 100 kilometers and 24-hour non-stop. And all those donations will be split between the Gathering Place and Rua Counseling Center. And, of course, the email is on it, the flyer, WILGUINEY@gmail.com. And his phone number is there. And if you want to donate or just join him in his efforts to raise money for mental health. And anything else you want to ask me?
No, I just wanted you to get the message out there before we run out of show today, Susan. And like Bill said in his email, if you tag me on social media, I'll share it around.
Okay, great. And he's, like he said, and he walked for himself because he feels good. It feels good. He does. But he does know that it'd be nice to have somebody walk alongside of him, especially at night.
Absolutely.
And everybody struggles. Everybody has mental health, and it's how we treat it. There's different treatments, walking, talking, it's something that should never be pushed aside.
Absolutely not, and I appreciate the hard work yourself and Bill do on this front. We could all do a little bit more. Thanks for this, Susan. Don't forget to tag me on socials and I'll share it around for you.
Great. Thanks, Patty. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. See you, Susan.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Last word goes to line number 4. Jerry, you're on the air.
Hi, Patty.
Hi.
I just, here I am, I've never done this before, but here we go. I guess what I'm calling about is that what's happening now with the RNC, I guess they're doing checkups, and they're doing the criminal record screen certificate. And what's happening now is I'm going to say in over their head because people are waiting as long as 5 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks to get their certificates back, which is causing them trouble in regards to getting the job and the job still being there. I guess where it comes from me more so is because my grandson and, the young people the same age around he is, he went over and he got a job. The only thing is that he has to have a certificate or a criminal record before they can hire him, because that's how it goes. Anyway, he's not sure now if I don't know how long, because they're telling him he has to wait another 4 to 5 weeks before he get a certificate. And I'm not too sure that whether it's the young people or, the older people who are in the same boat. I mean, it's just unreal. In regards to the young people, they're putting the young people in with the older people, which I would say is kind of tangling things up, because, like, my son is 17 years old, and the oldest, like in regards to the older kids who will get checked out, would be 18-year-olds. I mean, you can't compare a 17-year-old. Now, they're looking, again, for the same thing, the screening. And you can't compare a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old to an adult. Like, to me, it would be a whole lot easier, and here we go again, to me. There must be another process they can put in place to divide it a bit so the kids aren't waiting as long as the older people are. I would assume that the reason, like, these kids are trying to get in where the older people are, so I think it's just tangling it all up. But it's really, I don't know, it's just not fair to the young people and not fair to the older people, because it's just not working right. I mean, 5 weeks, and that's when you talk to people around. That's the minimum I've heard so far, 5 weeks.
I'm going to hop in before I run out of time, but if you just need a code of conduct, you can also go through a private agency like the Provincial Investigative Services. They can't do like I'm sorry.
Patty, they won't do it, because what they do still has to go through RNC. Been there.
Well, I just had someone go through them, and the turnaround was 5 days, so I don't know what the complicating factor...
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
Which one was it?
I'm pretty sure it's Provincial Investigative Services. I gave him 2 or 3 different options, and I believe that's one he chose. I'll send him a text and confirm it and talk about it on Monday. But you've had the last word, Jerry, as we just cleared 12 o'clock.
All right. No, that's fine.
I appreciate your time.
All right, take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, good show today. Good shows all week. Big thanks, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again on Monday morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning, Monday morning. Bye-bye.